This is Tiambe Lockhart, and you are listening to Off to the Land of Milk and Honey. This is a podcast that is dedicated to Indigenous women and others. Indigenous meaning Native American women, Black women who are indigenous to this whole world, Latina, Asian women who identify with their pre-colonial ancestors and traditions. This is a thrival guide that will support us in reclaiming our joy, our liberation, our feelings of safety, empowering us. And this is episode 5, Cortisol, the Quiet Genocide on Black Women. And I titled it this, and I wanted to speak on this because everyone speaks on genocides that are happening outside of the country or that have happened in this country in the past. And I believe that not only Black women and children have still been experiencing a quiet genocide when giving birth and not being heard, but also there is a refusal to hear Black women, our abuse, our trauma, our pain, and to recognize us as human beings still. I believe it's this society's default to treat Black women like mules, and we as Black women internalize this projection and subconsciously treat ourselves like mules. We've learned not to care for ourselves, not to value ourselves, and just to endure. So today I will speak of how unhealthy environments that we put ourselves in can birth disease and illness. And also I will speak of J. Marion Sims, who is a staple in American medical history. And he believed that Black women felt no pain. So we will get into that. I wanted to talk about cortisol because I think cortisol is the root of a lot of health problems, and I think that it is avoidable. So let's break down what cortisol is. Cortisol is a stress hormone produced by the adrenal glands. Chronic cortisol levels result in high blood pressure, reduces your learning capabilities, anxiety, memory impairment, neuroinflammation, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, organ functions, creates weight gain, increased probability of stroke, brain fog, depression, erectile dysfunction, and so many others. And like I said, it affects your organ functions because it runs through your organs. It runs through your blood. Having chronic stress, the stress hormone. And the interesting thing about it is it activates this, the nervous system, which is your fight or flight response. And what I learned from my therapist is that our fight or flight response in our nervous system, it doesn't have a dim switch. It's either on or it's off. And the interesting thing about this is that your nervous system doesn't recognize an actual threat or the thought of a threat. So let's get into this. Let's talk about what creates cortisol and what I feel is easily avoidable. I believe, so when you're dealing with illnesses and sickness and all of that, a lot of times doctors, Western doctors will tell you that it's genetic. So if your mother had it, if your grandmother had it, then most likely you're going to have it. While that can be true, I personally, and I'm not a doctor, okay, I personally believe that it is a lot of these diseases and illnesses and imbalances are created by your environment and your belief systems. So let's say that your mother is a doormat. Your mother doesn't speak up for herself. She doesn't even know what boundaries are. And then she gets ill. She gets high blood pressure because she's taking on all of this stress all the time. And she doesn't know anything about boundaries. She doesn't know anything about regulating her emotions. But if she would learn to say no, if she would learn to speak up for herself, if she would learn what she needed to do to regulate her emotions, she could probably avoid the illness. So I believe that it is where we inherit these belief systems. We inherit how we go through life from our parents. So it's not necessarily
saying that it is genetics. It's just saying this is what we inherit. And I'll get into this when we're talking about Yod and Sebek, the eighth Sephira. But we see things as symbols, right? So I remember Brother Panic, rest in power, he was doing a lecture and he was talking about symbols. And he was talking about basically how you manifest, how you change, how you create, how you change your life. Trauma, repetition, deprivation, and symbols. So symbols can be words and all the things. And when he was talking about symbols, he broke down. So when someone is of European lineage, they see a rope, they're like, oh, okay, there goes a rope. You know what I mean? They might think about the ways they can tie the knot. You know, camping, maybe somebody went camping. When a Black American sees a rope, they're like, oh shit, lynching. I'm going to get lynched. What the fuck's going on? You know what I mean? So that's symbolism. We get taught these symbols through our parents. So we get taught what things are, how to go through life through our parents or our family. That's how we're taught. That's our reaction to life. So I want to talk about the environment a little bit deeper, and I want to talk about unhealthy and codependent relationships with family and friends. Now, you might think like, oh, they're my family. This is my father. This is my sister. This is my cousin. This is my mother. Or this is my friend, and I've known him for 20 years. But we need to realize that when people are psychologically and emotionally abusing us, and how that ripples into creating high cortisol levels, which then ripples into medical problems. So when you're talking about emotional and psychological abuse, it's tricky because with physical abuse, you can see it. You're like, girl, you have a black eye. Like, what the fuck happened? But when you're talking about emotional abandonment, abuse, or when you're talking about psychological abandonment or psychological abuse, you can't see it. We have to understand that what comes along with psychological abuse is backstabbing, gaslighting, and this creates confusion. Emotional abuse creates confusion. And with this confusion, we start to mull things over in our heads. Even when we're not around this person, we're thinking about, well, they say they love me, but then they did this. I told them this, but then they went and told this other person, and now we have to talk about it. And oh, okay, I'm so sorry, but then we're doing it again, and then we're going back, and then we're going, and just like I said before, our nervous system doesn't understand an actual threat in front of us, a tiger in front of us, or when we're thinking about things over and over and over and over again because it doesn't make sense. This is confusion. That is abuse. The cortisol levels are then pumping, which then affects your organs, which then affects your blood, which then affects your high blood pressure, which then affects all of this stuff. So we think, oh, I'm just going to thug it out and just be this person's friend. They're just going through a lot. And I had to make the decision in my life where I started to have not like some major health stuff, but like a little like some funky stuff. And I'm the type of person to where I really never get sick. I've gone like 7 years and never have gotten sick. But I had something little funky going on, and I was like, oh, and it was related to chronic stress. And I remember having to make the decision, well, do I want to continue this relationship and continue this pattern of over and over again, writing long emails and going back and forth and having these disagreements and this person crossing my boundary, this person talking shit about me behind my back, this person betraying me, taking advantage of me, being a doormat, having to take the time, have a fucking dumbass conversation that lasts an hour over and over and over again. Apologies, think we're cool, we're not cool, over and over and over again. Do I want to keep doing that? And that fucks with my health. It It messes with my ability to be present with my son. It takes away the possibility of having a future with my child having a mother, with me seeing my grandchildren. Or do I want to make the challenging decision of removing myself from this environment, sending love, not even sending love, because I don't even do that bullshit, but just exiting with love and gratitude for the time spent, for the lessons, for the good times and whatever, really be able to be present with my child, really have so much space. I've dealt with a lot of tyrants, you know, and I'm not going to get into the details. And I'm actually really grateful for everything that's happened to me in my life, because it made me very, very strong, and it brought out gifts that had laid dormant in my bloodline for a long time, spiritual gifts. But during my pregnancy, during my postpartum, and really for the past 7 years, I have dealt with tyrants, just straight up psychological warfare, spiritual warfare, emotional warfare. And this was on top of giving birth 2 weeks into quarantine, and the rioting and the Black Lives Matter, and dealing with my own things that postpartum brings up, and then thinking I could confide in people, and those people were flying monkeys for the people who were tyrants. It just was a lot. And so I finally just was like, you know what? I know that my son is watching. He's watching how I'm treated and how I allow people to treat me. And I'd rather thug it out by myself and be a lone wolf with my son for however long we need to do that, rather than my son see me get disrespected, rather than my son see me completely distracted with bullshit. I want my son to see me thriving, because I want my son to thrive. I want my son to have a great time at life. I want my son to master his mind and to know that he is in the driver's seat. He's not supposed to be pulled around like a rag doll and a doormat and an emotional punching bag. So I had to make that decision. And so I highly recommend removing yourself from environments like that. The other thing that I want to talk about is J. Marion Sims. He made great leaps in the medical field and in the gynecology field. He was a pioneer of sorts, but it was at the cost of Black women, Black slaves, and their children. He would experiment, aka torture, Black women and tortured their newborns. And he believed that Black women didn't feel any pain, so he did not use anesthesia on Black women or their children. And almost all of the newborns died. I mean, all of them died. There was no way. But he experimented on Black women in their wombs and their bodies. And what is wild about this is that they had a statue of him in New York, in Central Park, I believe it was, for years, congratulating him on all of the beautiful work that he's done. Just that alone, psychologically, that is subconsciously telling the descendants of slaves that we just don't matter. And that brings me to my point, that Black women's voices, trauma, abuse, it doesn't matter. And you see this now in the medical environment, where Black women go in to give birth and leave in body bags. Their children leave in body bags. And you think, well, why is this? And I believe that it's implanted in the society to not hear us. And it's been passed down to not hear us from J. Marion Sims on and on and on and on. It's a thing to demonize Black women, to see us as gold diggers, or to overly sexualize us, to put us in these positions of the singer or the entertainer, or we're valued as your midwife. We're valued as your nanny. Come care for me. I had somebody who calls it's called mammy porn, actually, when white women want to be coddled and taken care of by a black woman. It's called mammy porn. But that again is an environment. These are environments with the medical system where people don't hear us, and even just in general. And so it's important to really just start removing yourself from environments where this is happening, whether that be at work, whether that be in family circles, friend circles, communities, whatever that is, just removing yourself, especially if you have children, because your children are watching how you're treating yourself. And we want our children, just as we want our children to be eating healthy, we want our children to be living in peace when they're older. We want to provide healthy habits of communication and ways that we're treated so that our children don't have high cortisol levels dealing with stressful ass people who won't take their ass to fucking therapy. We all can look in the mirror and take accountability for our lives, but some people don't do that. And so we can let people go with love and with grace and with gratitude when they don't. And now I want to introduce more tips, more solutions, more tips of what we can do to support ourselves. So when we take ourselves out of these environments, I like to use certain techniques to manifest new environments, new friends, friends who are like family. And I do it from a spiritual place and I do it from a physical place. So an example, I was homeschooling my son for years, and pat on the back for me, my son reads at a third grade level. And he loves learning. So I'm very proud of myself, having a mommy moment. But at the same time, you know, I had to not homeschool because I just didn't have that much support. I went after trying to find a school for him from the physical plane by busting out my Excel worksheet, putting a list together of all of the schools, how far they were, what's the rating, is it LAUSD, is it charter, da 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 da. And then I would pray. I would light my candles. I'd call in Archangel Gabriel, Archangel Metatron. I would call in his benevolent ancestors from his father's side and from my side. I also would affirm, I know that we're going to find the best school that is the best fit. He's going to be so protected and safe, and he's going to thrive. And at this time, I didn't even know about charter schools. I didn't even know really what there was. I was just like, oh my God, like I'm putting my son into the system and all these things. And I still wish that I could homeschool, but I just kept affirming and I just kept praying and I kept meditating and I kept envisioning him at the best school that was the best fit for him. And we got into the best fit for him. It happened. So when we're looking for these things, we can manifest them through doing our physical work and through doing our spiritual work. And also understanding that we're valuable enough, receive better. That's the main thing. If you think that you're not that valuable and this is all you have and the first option is all you have. I remember I went to one school and I was like, what the fuck is it? Just having standards and having values for yourself, especially as a Black woman, is really important that I'm learning. The other thing, which is my jam, is breath work. Oh my God. Breath work. There's so many different types of breath work. There's breath work circles, sessions that you could do. You could do them in person. You could go on YouTube and find them. There's square breathing, which is amazing. I remember when I was at the peak of really doing my healing and I was excavating all of this trauma and generational trauma, ancestral trauma, and I was experiencing so much anxiety. I would do square breathing, and that's when you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, breathe in for 4, and you just keep going. And you could do different numbers, and if you like to use numbers in your spiritual routines and your ceremonies, then you can change the number up depending on what you need or whatever. You can get crazy with it. I personally recently found out about the ocean breath, which is bomb. It's really good too if you are trying to quit smoking, whether cigarettes or weed or vaping. It's so good. So the thing about breath, and I'm going to do a whole episode about the breath, but the thing about breath is that if you notice in nature, right? And nature's our teacher, animals that breathe more frequently take more breaths a minute, like dogs, versus animals that take less frequent breaths per minute, like turtles. The ones that take less frequent breaths per minute live a longer life. So when you're doing ocean breath, less air is coming out at once. That's really good for your vitality and your life force energy. I also love, whenever I feel off kilter, I forget what it's called, what its proper name is called, but alternate nostril breathing. That's bomb too. I also love, in the mornings after I do my meditation, I do breath work for 5 minutes, and I do a breath work, this exercise to wake me up. And this is a exercise that my homeboy, when he went to India, and not like, a resort, I'm gonna go to India and see what the brown people are doing. But like, he's really about that life, and he was with like real gurus. And he taught me one, you pump for like 20 times and then you hold it and everything like that. So he didn't give me permission to share it, but I will say, if you can do anything that's going to activate that Kundalini, it's so bomb. Kundalini is so healing. And if you could do, it might sound a little funny to people, where you do an anal lock. It's like a genital and anal lock. And then you also do a chin lock. I don't know what exactly happens, but it really will get you going in terms of just like that Kundalini. You could just feel it kind of like filling up your body. And I do this in the morning to kind of wake up. And this isn't the long breaths. This is more of the faster breaths, and then holding your breath. The more I experiment with breath work and the more yoga I do, you feel like sometimes you're on psychedelics with breath work. You don't really need drugs, and that's why as I get older, I just move closer and closer to sobriety, because I'm just like, what the fuck do I have the herbs, and I have breath work, and I have yoga, and it's so healing, and it feels so good. Your lungs aren't getting jacked up, your kidneys aren't getting jacked up, your liver isn't getting jacked up. There's a guru that was from the Himalayan mountains, and he is called Tat Wale Baba. I'm going to put in my IG post, this man was like 80. Some people say he lived 100 and something years old, but he was like 80 years old when he looked 30. He had like these long dreads, and he was just chilling, and he did breath work, meditation, yoga. And so that is just like the vibe. And when you're doing these things, your cortisol level, obviously it's not pumping through you. Your organs, your mind is being restored. And also when you're doing these things, and when you're doing breath work and meditation, you can make better decisions. And that leads me to rest. Rest is so important. I'm the type of person to where I would just thug it out, drink caffeine, and keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving. And last year I had to really stop and be like, what am I doing? My body doesn't feel right. I'm tired. I need to learn to rest. And I got the download, and I was just like, okay, teach me how to rest. And I realized in my family, we don't rest. When I would go to my grandmother's to visit, and she was actually my great aunt who raised my mother, we weren't even allowed to sit on the bed. This just is some slavery shit that's just passed down to where you just keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going, and shut up, whatever. You keep going and keep going and keep going. And that's another thing that's passed down to where people can say, oh, well, my grandmother had a thyroid problem, or my mother had, diabetes or whatever. It's like, but how are y'all treating your bodies? And we just learned to go. I'm not with the grind culture. I'm with getting my rest. And then I can make healthier decisions. We've all made weird decisions when we're tired, when we just need to take a nap. Shout out to Nap Ministry. on IG. Check her out. She's amazing. I love her work. It's so important. Since resting and really paying more attention to my body and drinking my herbs, like there were three things that were clearly supposed to be passed down to me. Three illnesses, diseases, slight things that just like, oh, well, I got it. And I don't have them at all. And I learned to rest. And then you don't have to drink so much caffeine. You don't have to take so much external substances to make you feel better or to keep going. You know, solutions are easier. And then also is trauma dumping. Let's talk about trauma dumping. Now, I love a good trauma dump, but it is not okay to trauma dump on your friends, okay? It is not good to trauma dump on your friends. It is not good to trauma dump on your partner, on your children. Nobody wants to hear that shit. It is an energy exchange. You are being an energy vampire, and I've been there. So I'm not even trying to like call anybody out or be judgmental, but it's not okay. But there are legal places that we can trauma dump. We can trauma dump on trees, like I talked about last time. I love cursing people out to the trees. And I always say before, and with all trauma dumps, I say, I do not wish to go any farther to this person. I don't want to hurt this person. I don't want to send them any type of negative energy. I just need to get this out of my body, because when we keep things in our body, when we don't speak up, because sometimes we can't really speak to people about it, because there are people who are off that will use your kindness, that will use the opportunity to have a conversation to take advantage of you. So, but we got to get it out somewhere. So therapy, I love therapy. And make sure that if you go to a therapist, that if you are a person of color, if you are a woman of color, go to a woman of color. My therapist is a Mexican American woman, and she's also spiritual. The last time I experienced grief, she's like, so how are you going to take care of yourself? You know, she's empowering. That's really important for a therapist too, to be empowering. And I was like, I'm just going to go to Yamaya, and I'm just going to tell her my problems and just leave it all there. I'm going to give her my burdens, and she's gonna support me. And my therapist was like, good, okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna take a bath, and I'm gonna light a candle on my ancestor altar, and I'm just gonna tell them my problems and give it over to them. She's like, okay, great. But therapists who doesn't understand the spirituality be like, put her in a psych ward. You know what I mean? So I think that that's important. It's also important to have a therapist that is empowering to you. You're not going to sit there and rehash the same thing over and over and over again. You can't heal if you keep scraping open the wound over again. Even though sometimes it's important for your therapist to push you and to have difficult conversations, which I hate, but it's important to do the healing for them to push you a little bit. But when they're not giving you tools and empowerment, they're just taking your money. Trauma dump to Mami Wata. That is the water. Yamaya, Oshun, the river. Just tell them all the problems as well. I like to trauma dump to the angels and the ancestors. And I also like to, sometimes you can burn a candle, and you could just, if you're really angry and you have a lot of rage and you have to get it out, I'll speak into the fire, and I'll do that. And again, say, I don't want this to go farther. I don't want to hurt this person. And then Ma'at, I love to trauma dump on Ma'at. I like to tell her any injustices. And I like to say, I feel like there's an imbalance here. Please balance it back. And if I'm wrong, please gently show me how I can adjust myself. And if I'm wrong about this person is actually doing, then please show me, and please bless this person. Also protection is really important. Understanding that people are off, understanding that people can have severe cognitive dissonance to where they don't really know what they're doing. They're in autopilot. Understanding that some people do literally have demonic attachments, entity attachments. Some people are just not there. The elevator is not going up to the top. They are gone. They've just done so much gnarly shit, so much karmic shit. And also understanding that some people really don't like for you to have joy. When you've been through depression and anxiety and a whole bunch of trauma, and then you finally excavate all that and you work through it, even if it's taking you years, you holding on to your joy, okay? You got the wonderment. I got all that shit. I like going through my life happy. And then I like going through, even when I'm not happy, feeling the feelings and just working through it. And then you usually somehow, because whatever makes you kind of unhappy or creates dis-ease, you kind of are freed from something in a way. So if you work through it and you just keep working through it and keep breathing through it, you usually give birth to something new and you're usually expanding, right? But just understanding that people like pettiness, some people like chaos, some people they don't like peace. They didn't have peaceful childhoods, and I didn't either. And there was a point to where I feel like a long time ago, like I was just in chaos all the time, because a lot of people don't want to sit with themselves, don't want to look at their trauma, don't really want to look at how they've been harmed, how they've been abandoned by their parents, how they've been abused. And then the last thing is calling in joy. On Fridays, which is Venus Day, Oshun Day, Hataru Day, I always wear a dress or a skirt. I just am extra that day. I tip more than I normally do. And I put on my perfume and all the things. I think that it's fun to do that every day, but I really go hard. I go to the river. I try to do some sort of beauty treatment, whether I do it at home or go get it. And just really embody that joy, embody that sweetness. And if you do have troubles with that, you can always make a sugar jar. Write down, like, I want to have more fun. I want to have more joy. I want to have more bliss. I want to have more nirvana. And you can put it in a little honey jar or a sugar jar. Honey jar goes slower. Sugar jar is a little faster. I also like to work with Archangel Haniel. That's beauty. That's Venus. That's all of the things. And I love Hetaru. And then I also love Oshun, sitting by the river and just talking. We had the best time on spring equinox. We went to the river. It was really sweet. But also understand that every goddess who is a goddess of Venus is also a goddess of war. So Oshun, as sweet as she is, she has a temper. Hetaru, as sweet as she is, she turns into Sekhmet. So understanding too that it's important to protect yourself. If we have to go to war, we can go to war. You understand? Because we love and we protect what we love. So yes, that is what I got to say. And the book about breathing is The Science of Breath. So I'll put all this up on my IG, and I also have a Patreon that I post things every day, free stuff. And then if you want a membership, it's like $4. And I post my favorite herbs that I've talked about more in depth. Lectures that I love that have to do with the episodes that I spoke on, and books that I love that have to do with the episodes that I spoke on. Yes. So this is Tiambe Lockhart. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.